Chapter 38, Section 20F, this meeting is being recorded. There will be no executive session tonight. Our next meeting is January 8th. That's 3 weeks, so it's a little bit of a pause. And I wouldn't want to leave tonight without saying happy holidays to everybody. And enjoy your holiday in good health. Acknowledgements and recognitions. I recognize the passing of Lucy Lord, who worked for the Board of Health for a number of years. I did not know her personally. We express our condolences to her family. Anybody speak about her? Anybody know her?
She was a fixture for years, and her son Quentin worked on the highway department. So
Okay.
people knew her. She was lucky enough to be retired for a few years. So hopefully she got to enjoy herself.
Okay, again, our condolences to the Lord family. And Jim, could you do us the honors on this piece of news from the legislature?
Yes, I do not have it right in front of me,
I
but
have it. Just pass it, Diane. That's an old iPad, so go easy, Jim.
the Board of Selectmen, or the Board of Selectmen's office was notified last week that on December 14th, 2023, the governor signed into law the changing of the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board. So that is now official. We may require one local vote just to change a couple of things, but you are now the Select Board.
Yay.
Well,
Congratulations.
there you go.
Finally.
Great, thank you.
Took a couple of years to get that done, but
Couple, I thought it was more like 3 or 4. Well, that's great. Okay, so those are the introductory remarks, unless anybody has any other acknowledgements.
Do you want to talk about the storm coverage? The storm today?
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, well, we do thank everybody for putting up with that, and our town people, the highway department, and everybody else who contributed to take a bad situation and try to make it better. And it's funny, we always worry about hurricanes, but it's these nor'easters and these heavy rains and winds that just as bad for us. But anyway, we thank all of our employees who contributed, and police and so on and so forth, the fire department, for keeping our town safe. Okay, I think that concludes introductory remarks. We welcome Bob Barbosa, who will take minutes for us tonight. And the first item on the agenda is a fee hearing. It's the proposed fee increases. There's an attached schedule. Jim, could you introduce this topic for us?
So, talking to the Finance Committee and the Select Board, we had all the departments take a look at their existing fees and make recommendations as to what fees should be changed. Departments did comparisons with like communities, Dartmouth, Fall River, Somerset, Swansea. Some departments chose some other communities that are similar to Westport, like the Shellfish, compared to some other communities that weren't necessarily Fall River or Somerset, Swansea. They've come up with a number of proposed fee changes. Those have been advertised. They are in front of you. We have Board of Selectmen fees, Marine Services fees, Harbor Master Shellfish, a few Planning Board fees, Building Department, which includes the Inspector of Wires, commercial buildings, plumbing and gas. I've tried over the last week or so to come up with an estimate as to what these fee increases would generate, and it's very difficult. Some of these are higher fees. Like some of them are easy. The Board of Selectmen would generate roughly $8,000 to $9,000 worth of fees. We know how many fees go out, how many permits there are each year. We know what the increases are. Some of the other ones, such as the Building Department, that can change. You get one solar project in, and that can be a $50,000, $60,000 fee. So it's difficult to quantify some of these. But I think the best guess would be somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $100,000 if all these fees were enacted. I've been through the fees. I reviewed them with the departments and with the information that they submitted. I would recommend approval of the fees. I think the only one that I had a question was the Hicks Bridge boat ramp. I think it was originally thought that fee was $30 and it was going to go up to $45, but the fee is $20, and I think the recommended increase after speaking with the harbor master, would be either $30 or $35.
Now, Jim, do you recommend, and select board members can weigh in on this, do I need to read all these and then we put in a hold for ones we want to discuss, or is that not necessary here?
I don't think it's necessary, but if there's interest in maybe looking at them individually and putting a hold on some, then it might be the best
Okay.
way to move forward.
Okay, I'll give the select board members a minute to look it over and see if there's anything they would like to discuss.
I'm gonna post them on the website or something so the public can see them.
The fee hearing was advertised. These were not on the website, though, so they could see if
They were in our agenda on the website.
oh, they were on the agenda.
They are, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true, they were part of the agenda. We
Yeah.
got them as
Yes.
attachment, that's correct.
Well, they are numerous and cover a lot of areas. Pretty much the whole town. There's 2 pages worth here.
Well, I agree with the town administrator that the Hicks Bridge ramp, like, should go from 20 to 30 rather than 45, but I'm okay with all the other ones.
Does that need to be a motion or just a?
I don't know, I'm just expressing my opinion.
Well, let's see if there's any other comments.
Are there any others?
Are there any others? I don't have any that caught my eye. I went through these, and they all look to be in order, and I took note of the fact that these had been tested in the market and appear to be necessary and fair. But I second that, Shannon, what you were talking about. So we'll make that change. Are there any other changes? Now, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to make a comment? We have only 2 people here who officially qualify as the public, but I do want to make the offer for the public to come forth if so inclined. I guess not, okay? And that's okay, too. So, is there any further discussion?
Well, I move approval of the fees as presented with the exception of the Hicks Bridge ramp at $30.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion? If there's no discussion, I assume it's time to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none. The motion carries unanimously, Bob. Thank you. Okay, and thank you for that. That's an important piece of action that we needed to take. Okay, the next area is 2 appointments and resignations. We have only one, which is A, request to appoint Ryan Furtado as cemetery laborer. Jim, again, can you lead us?
Ryan's been there the last couple of years as a seasonal employee. He's currently working there now, finishing up his seasonal employment. We are short one person at the cemetery. The foreman resigned a couple of weeks ago. Ryan's been a good worker. He shows up all the time. He works hard. I'd recommend approval of Ryan as a cemetery laborer.
Mr. Chair. Effective when?
I'd say effective Monday, whatever date that is,
Did you say if this was a union
Monday,
job? or non-union job?
December 25th.
December 25th.
Yeah, there you go.
That's Christmas.
He gets to work Christmas Day.
So it's gonna be the 26th, the business day probably?
We could do it effective tomorrow if.
Gonna get a holiday or? All right, what's tomorrow's date, 19th?
The 19th is tomorrow.
Okay, I'll move it for December 19th.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Again, Bob, it carries unanimously. Thank you. Next series is action items. There are several. The first is A, a request from the planning board for comments and recommendations from the Board of Selectmen, which we now know as the Select Board, for a 2-lot subdivision located at 247 Gifford Road. Jim, again, we have this in the package. Could you tell us anything more
It's
that we
just
need
a
to know?
small 2-lot subdivision, small gravel road going in about 100 feet or so with a little turnaround. I don't know if there's a lot to comment on. I don't have any specific comments.
Get busy in that neighborhood. No comments.
I don't have any comment.
Okay, this is one we don't do a motion unless it is
Right.
necessary, so it's just no comment. And by consensus, we'll report back to the planning board. You're on that meeting, so you can deliver the message for us. No comment on that particular item. Okay, thank you. That takes care of that item. The next is 3B, the request from George Ripley, the library director, to pre-approve education reimbursement for Assistant Director Bonnie Strebel. Jim?
So Bonnie Strebel is taking some courses to, or taking a course to, I guess, get her license as a librarian. This course is related to her job as part of the contract. She's entitled to it, but it does need approval from the Board of Selectmen. This is only going to cover a portion of the actual course. I think the course was over $1,000 or $1,200. I'm not sure offhand, but it was definitely more than this. I'd recommend approval of the $500 reimbursement.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries unanimously. Bob, thank you. The next one is also from the Library Director, George Ripley, to declare several pieces of furniture at the library surplus and authorize the town administrator to direct their disposal. There are following 5 items, well, 5 categories: 2 large wooden tables, 1 atlas case, 7 wooden chairs, 2 large folding tables, and 1 children's double-sized bookcase. Jim, any more?
No, he did submit this to the town employees, different departments throughout the town, to see if there was any interest in this equipment or these supplies, and there was none. I'd recommend approval of his request so that we can put them up for either auction or disposal, depending on the condition.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The motion carries again, Bob, by the vote of 5 in favor, none opposed. D, assign select board members to participate in union negotiations with the Westport Permanent Firefighters Association, the Police Officers of Westport Alliance, and the Highway Department AFSCME Council 93. Jim?
So, we've just been notified a request to start negotiations with the fire department. We will be receiving, I believe shortly, notifications from the police as well as the highway department, and I am just checking with the Board of Selectmen to see if who would be interested in representing on the various negotiations.
Okay, in the way of comment, as you probably all know, last time I was involved with the firefighters' negotiations in the police department. Ann, I think you were the highway, right?
I was highway and town, the
Town
Teamsters.
town
Yeah.
hall, Teamsters.
Now, in my case, I'd be glad to continue to participate, but as you know, my term expires in April. I'm not sure what I'm doing next, so
As does
it's
mine.
possible that somebody else would have to pick up the slack at the time, but I can start with that.
Which one's already sent in the information? Fire?
Fire.
Fire. If you don't want to tackle fire, I'll tackle fire.
I'm willing to take one of them. I gotta take the police.
Okay. That's fine, and that,
I'll take highway.
okay, so we're covered. Did you get that, Bob?
Do we usually have 2 people, or how do we usually do that?
He's the second person.
You're the second
Jim
person.
goes, yeah.
Okay.
He gets it all.
I get it all.
Okay, well, I think that's prudent, because that way we can be prepared for whatever occurs. I assume we would need a motion on this. Do we?
I don't think so.
No?
Do we
Just
know?
the consensus of who's going to handle it?
Okay,
So Steve for the fire, Shauna for police, Manny for the highway.
okay. And by consensus, we'll say that's done,
Works.
and we'll, off we go. Thank you. Okay, the next item, E, is to request to post the cemetery labor 2 position. Jim?
Yeah, this would not be a new employee. It's not intended to be a new employee. We do have one laborer currently in the position, and he's agreed to go for his hoisting license if we bump him up to the laborer 1 position. I think it's about $1.30 an hour more. He also helps out quite a bit. He does the payroll, he does the billing, so he's stepped up over the last 6 months when we've been short. Our traditional foreman, along with Steve Souza as well, who's kind of helped out to keep things moving over there. So I'd like to post a position. If he is willing to go for his hoisting license in the next 6 months, I'd suggest that we appoint the person, but we got to post it first.
Okay.
Move to post.
I'll second.
Motion made and
Do
seconded.
you have a date positive so you can go to the next step? Is it only short term with?
So it's 7 days we have to post in-house, but if that doesn't work, I wouldn't post out. I don't have an open position.
All right.
I want to
Sounds good.
see if we can move somebody out.
Okay, so the motion on the table, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The motion carries unanimously. Bob. Thank you.
Oops. Talking numbers.
Next item on the agenda is 4A, the town administrator's fiscal year, presentation of the fiscal year 2025 budget. And I guess that's why you're getting set up here. So we'll turn it over to you, Jim. We have material in our package, and fire when ready.
All right, so we've been working with the different departments over the last 2 months on the budget for FY '25, which will be at the town meeting, presented at the town meeting in May. We always talk about the negatives, but we do have a little bit of positive, a few positive things. Our local receipts were budgeted this past year at 80% of actual, which is down from 97, 96% the previous years. So this actually gives us a little bit of flexibility so we can increase going. This coming year, we can bump up our local receipts estimate for the next fiscal year by maybe 5%. In checking with other communities, the standard is pretty much around 80 to 85%. Most communities are probably at about 85%. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility there. Not much. You're probably looking at about, I want to say, $175,000. New growth this year came in $279,000 over budgeted estimates. We budgeted at 400. We came in at 679. New growth next year may be decent as well. We have 2 solar pilots that are coming on board, and I think those 2 solar pilots would add about $120,000 in new growth if they both get up. One has started construction along Old County Road, and the other one is off Pine Hill Road. Doesn't give us a lot of extra, but it does give us a little extra. Town departments, at least with the proposed budget at this point, and these numbers can change. We're still doing a lot of estimated numbers. We don't have the final numbers from the state. We don't even have preliminary numbers from the state. We don't have our insurance numbers and a few other things. But right now on the town side, we're not projecting any staff reductions. And it's mainly because we haven't added any staff in the last few years. So our budget has been pretty tight for the last, I'd say 3 years, but it's been more than that. It's probably going back almost 10 years. We really have not added much on the town side, if we've added anything. The assessor's overlay account was underfunded there for a year or two, and that is back up in the positive, and we have a little bit of extra in that account right now. So that is a plus. We were noted with the state on one of the filings that they wanted that back up in the positive. Free cash, it's going to be a good year for free cash right now. It has not been certified, but we're looking at over $3 million. There's a number of reasons for that. We had turnbacks of about $1.6 million, and when I say turnbacks, it's departments that were budgeted a certain amount of money, but those funds were not expended. About $1 million of that 1.6 was from 2 things. One was debt was budgeted higher than needed, excluded debt. There was a short-term borrowing. When they went to long-term borrowing, they were able to reduce that payment. So that accounted for about $350,000. And then the other big one was the health insurance. Over the years, through the investments and through the accounts, our group insurance that we work with, Schmig, had excess funds, and they can only, as part of the group insurance policy, they can only have so much extra. So they gave 2 months of holidays where the town did not have to pay into the insurance and the employees did not have to pay into the insurance. So that was almost $600,000. So while the 1.6 in turnback sounds great, we're really only at about $600,000. And most of that, $200,000 was the snowstorms. We had very few snowstorms last year, so there was minimal overtime in the highway department, and we had almost $100,000 in the reserves that were turned back. So there were not a lot of departments that turned back money. It just so happened that it fell in line this year with a few of the things that have been going on. Just revenue, and we go through this every year, but we're very limited as to what we have for revenue options. Most of the revenue is somewhat fixed or out of our control. Property taxes is 65% of the revenue that comes in, and that we really don't have any control over unless we have an override. We have excluded debt, which comes from property taxes, and that's fixed as well. What we pay out in debt is what we can collect as far as additional taxes. Local receipts is about 11% of our revenues. The majority of that comes from excise tax, which is about excise tax, meals tax, and food tax, which is about 50 to 60% of our local receipts. So we don't have a lot of flexibility in increasing our local receipts. We did some of that tonight with our local fees and hopefully bring in an extra $50,000 to $100,000, but that's about all we can do as far as bringing in new revenues when it comes to local receipts. Budget offsets are, we tap into the enterprise funds. We have the Water Enterprise Fund, the Beach Enterprise Fund, and the Harbor Enterprise Fund, and because some of our departments are utilized in those funds, we can offset some of those costs, but those costs have to be justified and directly related to those enterprise funds, so that is limited as well. And state aid, we don't know what state aid is going to be this year, so we're making projections. We will have the governor's budget, I think the fourth Wednesday of January, so we should have a general idea of where things stand. But right now we're relying on others as far as new revenue. As far as revenue trends go, that little chart there on the bottom right is our excise tax, which is the majority of our local receipts. About 50% of our local receipts come from excise tax, and you can see up until the two orange lines there on the right, the last two red ones have kind of leveled off a little bit. It actually decreased by, I think, $50,000 last year. Partly maybe because of the interest rates have gone up and car buying isn't as attractive as it was at one point. The orange is what we projected for fiscal year '24 and fiscal year '25, so we're still a bit conservative. We're projecting about 15% less of actual. Meals taxes rebounded from COVID. Room taxes has increased, but last year it kind of leveled off. We saw a big bump right at the beginning of COVID for meals tax. For room tax, and I think some of that has to do with short-term rentals, as well as we have a new hotel that came online a few years ago. The ambulance is another large fee, using $400,000 to $450,000. We saw a slight decrease in that account. That's partly due that we've increased the amount that the fire department is keeping on a yearly basis. So out of that revolving account, they keep a portion, and that helps fund supplies for the ambulance. It also helps fund additional ambulance purchases. We saw an increase in investment account last year income, when I think from, I want to say under 100,000 up to just over 300,000. So that's a plus, and we're hoping to see a little bit higher this year as interest rates go up. I know Sue Braden's been working to invest the money the best she can. A lot of it is short-term investments, so we don't have a lot of options with our money, but there are some of the accounts that we do have an investment company working with us to maximize the amount of interest we're getting on those accounts. As far as revenue coming in from the state, still we don't have any numbers yet. Those will come in January. We projected in this budget at this point at 2%, which is a little bit more than I projected the last couple of years, so I'm hoping those numbers come in where I projected, but we'll wait and see. I think the big number with the state number is going to be Chapter 70 funding. For about 10 years prior to last year, we were getting about $50,000 extra in Chapter 70 funding. So new revenue for each year would increase in Chapter 70, and this is the school reimbursement type money in the state aid. It would go up about $50,000 a year. Last year it went up $550,000 because we went from a minimum aid community to a, I don't know what the category is, but it's a non-minimum aid community. So we bumped up to additional category. I've tried, in fact I spoke to Rob O'Donnell from DESE today to see if we could get an idea as to whether or not we're still going to be considered a non-minimum aid community. And if we are, if we've either leveled off and we're going to see a $50,000 increase again this year, or a $400,000 or $500,000. He couldn't tell me, but he did. He said you got to wait till the budget, governor's budget comes out the end of January. What he did say was that inflation was down to about 1% this year, and it's possible that you could bounce back into a minimum aid community. Minimum aid community means you get roughly $30 or $60 per student additional revenue a year. So that would be a big hit to us if we drop down to a minimum aid community.
Did he say where the 1% inflation number came from?
He did not, and I didn't ask. As I was saying it, I said I should have asked, because it seems a lot lower than some of the other numbers we've been hearing. But
Yeah.
that's what he did say.
Well, that'd be great, but the Social Security went up 3.2% for next year. But of course, that's looking in the mirror probably. Anyway,
And then new growth was certified at 679, which was, as I mentioned a little while ago, was about 279 over what was estimated. As far as expenses go, this coming year, we're looking at salaries. We have a number of contracts that are up. The teachers union, which is a big one. Most of the big ones are up. Police, fire, teachers, and the highway department. So that's a bit of an unknown. Department expenses on the town side, we've pretty much level service. Many of them were level funded. Departments have really done a nice job of kind of holding the line and not increasing their expenses, but there's a negative effect to that too. It kind of shows in some of the things that we can provide to the public, and it limits us in what we can do. Senior exemptions, that was approved at town meeting last year. We increased the exemptions, and that was about a $50,000 expense in this year's budget that was not there last year. The pension assessment went up 5.8%. That is a firm number. Property insurance, we met with the insurance company last week, and he suggested we go in between 9 and 10% increase. We had most of our properties reevaluated last year and the year before, so he's not seeing any change in the property values this year. But he said 9 to 10%, which may not be bad compared to some of the other insurances, but
Sounds low to me, but.
it's still not a firm number at this point. That, that's a big number, and it can change quite a bit, even if it goes up a percentage or two. State assessments, these are, we pay some to Bristol County. We have school choice, charter schools. School choice and charter schools, we're increasing substantially over the last 7 or 8 years. Last year, they kind of leveled off a little bit, and we're hoping they stay fairly level this year again. If we see a big spike in school choice or charter school, that's going to impact the budget that's in your packet tonight.
Can I ask a question on this one?
go right ahead.
So I think you already answered this earlier, but on the health insurance, so we had a really large turnback on the health insurance, and which was making me think, why are we increasing at 5%? But I think, is that because of the one-time event that happened?
The one-time event, the 2 months holiday, so that saved us almost $600,000. So we pay about $300,000 a month, the town does, for health insurance.
So next year, we're not going to have that luxury. We're going to go back to whatever it should have been, whatever we budgeted before, plus 5%.
That's
Is
right.
what you're estimating.
Yep.
Thank you.
This is just, you've seen this pie chart as well. This is just where the money goes as far as expenses go. This is salaries and expenses. Community schools, 41%, public safety, 14%, general government, 10%, pension, insurance, 16%, debt service, 9%. We're finding that our fixed costs, and I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, were roughly about 15 or 16% of the budget. Now we're up about 25+% of the budget.
Jim, on that pie chart, schools at 41%. The last budget, it was 44%. Is this a new number based on what you've been working on?
This is based on the projected, yes.
This is all preliminary.
It is preliminary, and this is what's being budgeted, not necessarily what's being asked for. Last year, the budget included $500,000 in free cash, and that would have bumped it up probably to the
Yeah.
44% number.
Yeah.
Proposed budget increases, I just got a message, I don't know if someone. Board of Select meeting is not in cable. An old CPC meeting is being aired. Is that something you can change, Valerie?
What is this?
They said the Board of Selectmen meeting is not on cable.
Yeah, there's been a problem. Everything got disconnected and we're working on getting it back. I don't know. Last week I wasn't even able to do anything in the schedule or anything. And I changed the schedule and it didn't take it. So that stuff's not interacting.
Okay.
The IT department disconnected everything.
When will this be broken, Cass, in case people ask?
Tomorrow,
In this budget that's being proposed, very few increases. We're proposing a $25,000 increase for the old high school, just to cover costs. And those are the basic costs: electric, heat, maintenance, elevator. We're about, I think we're up to $150,000 now. We're still using some money from warrant articles that were passed last year and the year before to offset some of those costs as well. The old high school is costing anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 a year. Police software, there was an increase of $20,000 in the police budget, mainly storage, but it's software as well. They have the cameras, the body cameras now that have a considerable amount of storage, and there's also, I guess, indexing and being able to retrieve the information from the cameras is somewhat involved as well. The highway department, there's $50,000 additional in the salary line item for that department. It's been in there, last year it was not, the previous years it was, and we've kind of left the position unfilled as long as we could. So we will try to do the same this year. There may be some employees leaving, and we're looking to cross-train a little bit before that happens. OPEB, right now, well, last year we were at $100,000. This year we have $175,000 in the budget. There's also an IT part-time assistant for $25,000. Those are really the only non-required additions to the budget that have been put in there. It doesn't mean we don't have additional needs. We really have some critical needs in the building department. We need a part-time or full-time building inspector to assist the current inspector. The clerk position is part-time. We increased her hours last year for a few months, but again, it's a department that needs some additional help. It's a department where we may see turnover in the next couple of years, and we don't want to lose all that institutional knowledge as well. Town engineer, project manager, we've discussed before. It's something this town needs. We have a significant amount of projects going on, the Route 6 sewer and water. We have infrastructure projects at Gifford Road and 177, the roundabout at 177, and Tickle Road. We have the Hicksbridge Landings being redone. We have, there's just a lot going on, and a town this size with the projects that are going on, you really need, we need to start looking at a town engineer or some type of project manager to help assist not only on the projects, but to assist the other departments in addressing MS4 permitting, which is stormwater, which is now required by the EPA. All these things take time, and we just don't have the staff to manage it. Highway staff had also requested additional staff in the department. That could go anywhere from $60,000 to $180,000. The fire department's been trying to get up that one more position in its department for the last 3 or 4 years. I think 3 years ago we added one more, and this would be the 4th position that they've been working on for, probably at least a half dozen years. And then at some point the town's got to get a human resource assistant town administrator, and that could have a number of roles or a number of priorities, functions, procurement, human resource, finance. Human resource is getting more and more difficult every year. It's just between negotiations, Family Medical Leave Act, disability, the laws are changing, and it's difficult to keep up with without having the staff to do it. And it has the potential to cost us money. This is just a a chart just showing the yearly revenue increase. So this is what we see in yearly revenue increase that we split between the town and the school. And this goes back 10 years. So the darker line to the right is the overall revenue. The lighter line to the left of the dark line is the 54% share for the school department. And you can see it really, except for the last year and this year, you're pretty much around $1 million to $1.5 million a year of new revenue that's going to be split, which means the school department's going to get anywhere from $500,000 to $800,000 a year in new revenue. Town will get a little bit less. Last year, the school department We had to add $500,000 in free cash to get them up to a point that was acceptable, and even then, they still took some cuts. Same thing on the town side, while we didn't cut positions, we just did not add any. Going forward, I think we're looking probably in the range of about $1.4 to $1.7 million a year in new revenue. And I think we need to start over the next 4 or 5 years is basing our budgets on that number. Otherwise, you're just going to be digging more and more into the free cash, and it just doesn't work. This is the revenue split. If we do the right standard revenue split with the school, we're looking at about 1.9 in new revenue, minus some fixed costs. Our debt service is actually being reduced because we paid $300,000 off on the campground, so that actually helps the new revenue. Pension assessment, we're looking at just about $200,000. Health and life insurance, $300,000. Regional school assessments, $123,000. State assessments, about $56,000. So from that 1.9, we're deducting $325,000, which leaves $1.6 million. With a 54%, that would put the school at about $881,000, and the town side at $750,000. This is just a chart showing the school new revenue, and I'm just going to go to the next one because it blows up the last 4 years. So what it shows is in fiscal year 21, you're looking at about $320,000 that they use for new revenue, but $150,000 was free cash. So when we go into next year's budget, because that free cash is not available on a reoccurring basis, we need to deduct that from the starting point to develop a new baseline. We added that to the $400,000 in FY22, and then we had to add an additional $440,000 in free cash. So the following year, we're deducting $440,000 as the baseline, which starts us off $440,000 in the hole to begin with. We had $100,000 in new revenue that could be used, plus the we had $540,000 in new revenue, minus the $440,000. They really only saw $100,000. We had to add $300,000 in free cash, and again, you deduct that the following year in fiscal 24, and then in 25, we have to deduct the $500,272 from their free cash. So while we had $881,000 in new revenue, after you deduct the free cash, the school department's looking at an increase over last year's budget right now of $381,000 over last year's budget, which, looking at preliminary numbers with the school, that's really not sustainable. So we will have to look at different options for the school department. This budget that's in your packet today shows the 381. It's the only way I can even make it balance without going into free cash. I shouldn't say that. The other option, you have two options. You can go into free cash or you can cut elsewhere. So you can cut the school side, and you could make cuts on the town side to offset some of the school side expenses. And these I've mentioned, just the budget unknowns, which can affect my budget estimates. Chapter 70, I think, is going to be a big number. That could be anywhere from $50,000 to $500,000. I had estimated $100,000 in this year's budget, so if it goes down to 50, we got to correct 50. If it goes up to 500, we'll have some additional revenue to be dispersed. Assessments, school choice, and charter schools, those can be big numbers. I think our estimates are pretty good, but they can change. Same thing with Diamond and Bristol Aggie. And then insurance, health, and property. It doesn't take much. A percentage or two change in those can really impact the overall budget. We've submitted for free cash, but it has not been certified, and right now we're $3.2 million plus. This chart shows what the free cash is going back to 2004. You can see we had a good year last year at just over 2.1, and this year we're at 3.2. I think without some of the unexpected offsets with the debt, the health insurance, holidays, last year's relatively dry winter, we would be somewhere in the range of about $1.4, $1.5 million, maybe 1.7. So I think going forward, ideal range for free cash would be in the range of, I'd say, in between $1.5 and $1.8 million. So we're a little bit high on the free cash, but we're making adjustments in next year's budget. So we're increasing the estimated revenues for local receipts. So that'll impact next year's free cash a bit. But it's a good sign. You know, it's something we haven't had. But as you can see in the past, we've also had negative free cash. It doesn't take much to change some of our offsets. And as I mentioned before, budget concerns, we have negotiations with police, fire, teachers union, and highway. The school department, we have a reoccurring structural deficit, which we will need to address. There may be some options with free cash that we can address it over a few years, but even with that, they're still going to see some cuts. And again, we're waiting on some numbers from the state, which will impact the budget. Local receipts we mentioned, we've been able to bump that up from 80 to 85%, which will bring in a little bit of revenue this year. And free cash will be impacted next year. You know, budgets are getting tighter and tighter, which could have a negative impact on free cash for the following year. Don't have a lot of recommendations. I think we've kind of gone to the well as much as we can. I'd like to pay off the campground property. That's short-term debt, and it's non-excluded debt. I think we owe about $345,000 on that. So if we use free cash to pay that off, it would actually free up about $145,000 in the operating budget, which we could disperse through the town and the school. Still looking to fund capital projects through the CIPC through the free cash, and we put a little bit of money into the stabilization account. This would be a good year to put something into the stabilization account as well. We should be up around 5%. We're still only at about less than 3% in our stabilization accounts. You know, we may have to work with the school to see if we can get some type of agreement going forward for the next 3 or 4 years if we're going to utilize free cash or a portion of free cash or a significant portion of free cash. We need to know that going out 2 or 3 years that we can kind of absorb that free cash into the budget. Right now, we're not there. And it's continually gotten worse the last 3 years. I think last year we were looking hopefully at the override. If we would have gotten the override, that would have offset the free cash number used to offset the budget. Where we didn't get the override, we need to make that up elsewhere. High school, you know, we really need to push, and I think the long-term building committee is working towards that. We need to make a decision on the high school going forward. Still working with UMass Dartmouth. They are interested in leasing space just at this point for storage. There may be the possibility, not long-term, but you know, next year or the year after, for a couple of classrooms. Right now, it's just storage with them. We've requested a code analysis just to make sure that what they want to do for storage is permitted, and that no changes need to be made. We should have that in the next week or two, and we sent them a draft plan of what areas would be available for them to use. We've excluded the admin office areas that the school department's currently using at the high school, and we've excluded the after-school program classrooms in the gym that are currently being used by the school. They're going to see it, the UMass is going to see if that works into their plans. And then going forward, you know, we may have to look at some other, you know, whether we have to do it this year or next year, we may have to look at some other options. You know, we spend an awful lot of money on vocational schools. Is that an option? If we weren't involved in the vocational schools, that could be a $2 million change coming back to the budget. We'd have to absorb another 80 to 100 kids in our school system, but that may work better than sending them out. It's not something I don't think anybody wants to do, and it may be something that we can't do easily. The agreement may require all communities to kind of sign off on that. So something to consider, but I think it's a long shot. You know, we can look at our enterprise funds again and see if we can offset some of our towns with some funding from the enterprise funds. If some more of our departments are assisting the enterprise funds to get their work done. We talk about shared services. It's not always easy to do, but you know, maybe we look at a shared service with the school department for human resourcing. You know, possible IT. There's different options, but it always seems like a good idea, but to get it to work and get it to work efficiently is not always easy. I think the override is always on the table. Whether or not it gets presented to voters anytime soon is out of my hands, but it's something that's going to have to be done at some point. And as we move forward, you know, we're not looking to increase services because we can't, but we're probably gonna have to look and see what services, I mean, we do this every year, right? We sit back and we kind of look and see, is there anything we can reduce or eliminate? There's nothing we can reduce or eliminate that's not gonna have an impact on the public at this point. So that's where we are. I think that's all I have. In your budget package, there's spreadsheets with the projected revenue and the individual department expenses.
Jim, can you put the slide back up that show the services that we haven't got yet? You said it was important. It included the administrative assistant and the engineer.
Just lost mine.
All right, on the, out of our free cash for this year, why couldn't we consider having a part-time building inspector with less than 20 hours, so it's not, so it's, it doesn't have the holidays and whatnot, the good stuff with it. Why don't we consider having a, some kind of professional look into the town engineer / project manager position? What am I looking for? The term I'm looking for.
You want a contractor to do it, because if you contract out professional services,
Yeah.
because we talked about this before, you could fund that as, with non-recurring revenue.
Yeah.
If they were an employee, then you'd be adding to the operating.
Right, so I think we should get somebody, a consultant, to show us exactly what the job would be for town manager, project manager, because last time it was a mess when we tried doing it. You know, that might be 50K or whatever. Come in, get to know the town, tell us exactly what we need, so we could hit the ground running and bring it to town meeting, let them know exactly what they got. The other thing I think, well, all of these jobs are important, but I think we need some summer help in the cemeteries. It's been a headache every year, and we need to make sure we got the beach covered. The other positions are very important. I don't know if the board would consider looking at the duties of a town, assistant town administrator, just so we had that on the books. But I think the project manager is important because we're gonna have the big meeting coming up. We're trying to do Route 6, and I think down the road, it's gonna bring in more taxes. So I think that's kind of a critical position we should do out of free cash while we got it. Not create the position, put everything together so we can go for the position before a town meeting and whatnot. Part-time building inspector is just common sense to keep things rolling. It wouldn't be big money, part-time, non-benefit position. That's just a couple of my ideas to do while we have it. I think it's important. It's some of the complaints we get continuously, and I think we need to move forward with it.
So we're currently under contract for a wage study, right? That was approved at last year's town meeting.
Yeah.
Finally settled with them. They should have started already, but we should see some information in the next month or so. We can ask them to take a look at the town engineer, project manager type position and see what they have for qualifications and what they think the salary would be, and possibly what their duties are. I think we can amend that, you know, for under the current contract.
As you know, with free cash, we're not supposed to create positions, but let's boost up what we can do while we can do it with the part-time position to get some work done. The cemeteries haven't been looking good for a while. They're trying their best, but if we get another season like last year.
Yeah, last year was tough, and one of the things with the cemetery is just finding seasonal help, right? So
Right.
we've had the advertisement out every year, and it's just not a,
So it might need to be a little boost there, just, I mean, even if it's for a year, it's a part-time position, or maybe, you know,
Yeah.
whatever, we'd have to use our imagination, but not creating permanent jobs, just trying to help us while we have the extra funds for the year. And again, help with that other, especially the town engineer, that was such a mess last time. I think it's a good idea, we just need to present it to the town down the line.
But Steve, what are you talking about presenting to the town? Because we could, if we could put that in a professional services line item and hire somebody in a professional services capacity. I mean, I get wanting to understand the description, but I'm having a hard time following how you're not getting an employee at the end of that, what you just said.
I think it would, but I think it's something we gotta sell at town meeting, that might even be a debt exclusion.
Sell with
down the
what?
line. We had, I don't recall why we had to bring it to town meeting. Was it a stipulation within the highway department? Was it a new, I don't recall, but we had to bring it to town meeting, because I remember we had the discussion.
Would it be,
before my time, I'd have to check.
All right.
was it
Anyways,
because the personnel board have to create a new position in the personnel board? Like, we can hire professional services to do
yeah,
stuff if we have,
Well, again, to fund it down the line, I'm hoping if we're gonna need either an override or a debt exclusion to cover this, that we have it well explained. It's just not, oh, we need a town engineer. We need to have our ducks in a row exactly what's gonna happen. However we do it down the road, but I think the job needs to be laid out first. That's all.
If it went to town meeting and was okayed,
I
and
remember-
just didn't fill it, isn't it still sitting
Yeah,
there?
you're not,
We
you're not
went
getting
to town
any
meeting, we
benefit.
filled it, and then they flipped it back when he left. From what I recall. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I didn't research that deep because I didn't notice some of this stuff when I was perusing. So it was just some ideas with free cash that I think there's a lot of different areas we need to address without creating.
I think we need a town engineer starting July 1, and I think the only way to get a town engineer, this project manager, the only way to get it July 1 is through using free cash. Now, if you create a new, and I think the way to do it is through professional services, because you put the professional services line item in the budget. But, I mean, you could create a position. I think if you're going to create a job, then you're going to, you're looking at another $100,000
Yes.
job employee, right? So, I'm just having a hard time following.
Maybe I'm not stressing it enough. What I'm doing is try to justify why we would get a town engineer over the other important positions on there. We'd have a clear job description, and that's where I'm getting at. I know it's needed, you probably know it's needed, but we need to clearly explain why we need this $100,000 position and the duties that would be.
Well, I'm not in favor of adding a $100,000 position at all. I want to add professional services so that we have a
Contract.
temporary contract employee.
fine.
Because
Let's come up with the
then
duties.
we can use free cash, because, but I don't know, I'm just one person.
No, I would disagree with that. We need to hire a town employee.
Person,
Do we need it more than we need the assistant town administrator or building inspector?
Most definitely.
Do we
Yeah.
need it more than we need, we didn't even add, what do we cut on our side to pay for it?
well, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Our research first and justify it. I mean, if we have to look at all positions, fine. But I'm thinking with what we have in the works, very important. It would pay for itself, but you gotta show the duties and what's out there.
Yeah. We've been talking
I
about,
mean, with sewer and water, aren't we're gonna have to be looking to create an enterprise, we already have a water enterprise fund.
Yeah.
The sewer, we're gonna have a sewer enterprise fund. We're gonna need to be doing permitting, it's gonna be
I
all local
believe
stuff.
that we need a person to do it.
I mean, a consultant's not gonna help us with that.
They will if you task them
Well,
with
yeah,
doing that and
but
pay
we're
them to
not
do
their
that.
priority. It's a one-shot, we're not their priority. We need an
We
employee.
would be if we contracted it
We got
properly.
major problems with all our infrastructure, major problems.
Yeah.
And we haven't been able to manage the water enterprise fund since a piece of water main was put in. So moving forward, we need to deal with this. And we have a meeting coming up with Fall River to discuss all this. I mean, as we're saying, we need an assistant for the town administrator for human resources and stuff. Jimmy's the one that's sitting in this meeting to negotiate this sewer stuff.
Well, I think we need it,
this
but
is
how do you
gonna
want to pay
help
for
Jimmy.
it? How do you want to pay for it?
Well, I mean, we had ARPA money, we had earmark money from Senator Mike Rodricks that could have been used for this.
Not
That
for-
we- Yes, we could. Yes, we
Not for an
could.
employee.
Yes, we can.
I don't know if we could do
For sewer and water, yes, we can.
that. All right, well, that's the logistics that.
We need, we need this for the town of Westport. Otherwise, the things that have been going on with water connections, sewer connections, I mean, Jimmy can't handle that. The building inspector, some of the duties, like the MS4 stuff, the engineer, the planning board's doing right now. We have an engineer volunteer that you cannot believe the amount of hours that he puts in to the planning board, Bob Dale.
I believe it. I believe we need this
That's-
position. I believe we should have created a DPW like 8 years ago or whenever it was. We should have created a DPW then and set up the infrastructure for that, and that just failed. It didn't work. I'm totally fine with that position if we can pay for it. So if you want an employee, you have to pay for it out of the operating budget. Or we are going to have to do what we keep telling the school department not to do and use free cash to supplement our side of the operating budget. So I'm just worried about how to pay for it. I'm not saying it's not needed. I just want to pay for it.
Well, I think it'll pay for itself.
just a point on, we're talking about free cash. Now, this is something we may want to check out with our town council, but free cash is to be used primarily for non-recurring items, like capital expenses. And the Department of Revenue in the past, and this is many years ago, said it should not be used to supplement operating budgets. However, we have done that, and I know other towns have done that. We probably want to get a clarification on that, because if there's a problem here, we ought to know about it early on, before we start talking about how we're going to use that free cash for an engineer or for somebody else, just to be on safe ground. Maybe there's like a safe harbor provision, if you only use a certain percentage of it, but that was a big component last year in the school budget, which we all supported, but, and the auditors have not made an issue of this, nobody has, but I would like to know what is the rule here, what is the law? I don't think there's a bylaw or a statute on
It's
this.
a law, it's a recommendation.
It's,
Because it's gonna cost you more in the long run if you put on an employee with the free cash, they don't get it the next year, we have to pay to lay them off. That's the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah,
so it's advisory, it's a recommendation. We can use free cash this year for employees, but the next, town meeting's only approving budget for 1 year at a time, right? So if we use $1 million in free cash for employees this year, next year, we're just gonna have to figure out where to get another $1 million. Otherwise, we're gonna have to cut those positions or cut other positions.
well,
To make up
I
that
think
money.
behind the Department of Revenue's earlier decisions was that thinking. If you don't use it for one-time events, then you're in that position where you're going to have a hole to fill in a subsequent year. But I'm saying in a more rudimentary way, we probably ought to find out what is the guidance here, so we're not crossing some line, which I don't think we've crossed, but I don't know where the line is. Just an idea to give you more work, Jim.
We get the guidance, yeah. They've been pretty strong on the guidance not to use one-time funding for operating budgets.
Well, I think the
Like you
guidance has
said-
always been clear. It's just that,
Yeah.
well, what happens if you don't follow the guidance? I mean, we
just
want to
have-
know about that, so
We
it's
just have to be
behaving
more-
prudently, that's all I'm saying.
I mean, if we don't wanna do a consultant to look into that position, the town engineer, I think Jim, Highway, and Mike Burris, the planner, should get together and decide what do you think the critical needs are, so we can try to get it down the line. At the very least, I was thinking consultant will help us more, but
You're thinking consultant to draft the job description for a future town meeting,
And,
so
yeah,
not
it-
this year.
well, we could do it as like Manny says, we're gonna go for that, sewer line. And I would think we're gonna go for I was gonna do it when we go around, but January 24th, we're gonna have a pretty good sized meeting at the high school. We're gonna discuss if we wanna do just the one section of it, or the whole thing. In general, they're leaning toward the whole thing, which obviously a town engineer would help immensely, because you're gonna go by all these side roads, you're gonna have stub outs. We've gotta coordinate things with the stuff that's already there, the infrastructure, electricity, gas, et cetera. So, obviously, we'd love to have somebody in place. I mean, even if we do get the debt exclusion or whatever we're gonna go for, it's still gonna be a little time before we get the contracts done and stuff, but hopefully it's not eternity, hopefully it's only a year or so. We need
Part of
somebody-
it's, a piece of it's gonna go,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
And it's gonna be, the first leg's gonna be good. We're gonna see some good growth on it.
I think so, and unfortunately for some of the business owners, we might have to look at the tax rate split down the line, but the townspeople need to get some bang for their buck if we're gonna invest in it. But again, that's all gonna be discussed in January, but laying the groundwork, I think some of that stuff's important, including the building inspector, which is part of it. Keep things rolling, the faster he can go through projects and building permits, the faster we get on the tax rolls.
If I may, are you referring to your meeting on January 24th?
Yes, sir.
The January thing, yeah.
Yeah, I just touched base on it, I was gonna do it when we went around, but yeah.
Yeah, it's good to remind people.
As it gets
that.
closer, we'll remind it after,
Yeah, great.
after everybody's got their head out of the holidays. So,
I mean, just, so we have, how do we end up with $3.5 million in free cash? It's turnbacks from the
Jim,
departments.
yeah, Jim explained.
We have one, in the package you had turnbacks listed
Yeah, so,
in,
Just
New
explain it,
growth.
1.6
talking
in
about?
turnback, 600,000, the health insurance?
The 500 and something was the health
Health
insurance.
insurance, yeah.
so we had 1.35 in local receipts, we had 1.65 in turnbacks, and then there's kind of some miscellaneous stuff, and that could actually go down or up depending on what the state agrees should be
You see that?
certified or not certified. So out of that local receipts, we had, the new revenue is going down. We still expect to get about the same next year. We're actually going to increase that next year, right? So we'll be up about 85% of local receipts will be at 1.05. So that'll still give us $300,000 to $400,000 in free cash next year from local receipts. The turnbacks is what changes, right? We got 1.65 in turnbacks, but $1 million of that we will not see next year because it was related to the health insurance and it was related to debt service. And then out of the additional $650,000, we had roughly $200,000 in snow and ice, which we probably won't see this year. We had $100,000 in the reserve account, so that brings you down to about $300,000. And we had some positions that weren't filled quickly last year because it kind of happens to us, right? We get a vacant position, we got to post it, we got to advertise it, we got to hire somebody. We can't fill it right away, so you get a little bit of fluff in there, but that's why estimating for next year, you're probably down to about 1.5 million, give or take, and that could go down to $1 million, it could go up to $2 million, depending on how revenue comes in.
I think, you know, so we're not saying we're using this from free cash. I think we gotta look a little bit tighter into the turnbacks and seeing how we budgeted that money that's getting turned back instead of utilizing it so it didn't become free cash.
Well, I think the one that he didn't really talk about is, so he talked about the turnbacks, the 500 and what he just mentioned is the bulk of the turnbacks, right? The local receipts is really the news. We under budgeted, when we did the revenue projections for that year, we budgeted local receipts at a number and they actually came in higher than we budgeted, right? So that 1.35 was we didn't properly budget revenue side of the equation in that year. So one of the ways you up the operating budget is you estimate your local receipts closer to actuals. So you were actually talking about we've actually backed off a little bit because it's dangerous to do that. If your local receipts don't come in, then you're stuck, right?
I mean, I've only been watching it for the last 3 years, but it seems to be growing every year. So, maybe we have to look at that a little closer. I'm sure the money's in there for those positions that we need. We just have to look at it a little closer. I'm not afraid of using some one-time money to get an engineer up that will help us look into that stuff. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of things that we're not doing that we're going to need to do when you know, like this sewer and water. It's also fire protection. You know, I mean, sprinkler systems in these commercial buildings. I mean, do we all remember the Station Club nightclub fire? I mean, have we had any sprinkler systems installed off any businesses off of Route 6 since then? I mean, this is public safety. We can't leave it all on the town administrator. I mean, we are the water commissioners. We will be the sewer commissioners unless we come up with something. You're gonna need an engineer to determine that.
So just a quick thing on the turnbacks, right? You're always gonna have some turnbacks on the town side, just because we don't have the ability to transfer money from the expenses in one department to salary or vice versa. We don't have the ability to transfer from the town clerk to another department that may need the money. You know, the school department, they can do that throughout the year, they can move money around. We can't do that, so if you have one account, if you don't spend everything on office supplies, you're bound to get some turn back. So there will always be a little bit of turn back on the town side.
I'm just saying, and again, it's not my forte, but I just see it growing every year. And
Well, COVID was a mess too, so
Oh,
we
yeah.
didn't have a lot of people working that helped turn back, but, yeah. All right, well, did that help you any?
Of course.
I mean, I think that's just some idea that I think we should do while we have the funds available.
Yeah.
It's gonna be critical needs.
Well, I hope we can use those funds for those purposes. I'm just putting out a cautionary thought here, just to be on the safe side. Because we don't want to run into a situation where we're stopped from doing that, then that really limits our options. So I'd rather have, sanction or go ahead, or just tell us that we're slapped on the wrist, and okay, we can stand that, but we don't want to get hit in the head. Jim, can I ask a couple of questions about the material you sent to us? I was trying to figure out the percentages and everything, but I had to do some of my own math here. This is an early draft, it doesn't have the percentages. What I mean by percentages compared to last year in each department. But here's what I've got. Okay, the revenues are going up about 3.5%, 3.6%. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I didn't do the percentages here, but it sounds about right.
Yeah.
I will add another column for percentages.
Yeah. Yeah, well, just the next time when you do that.
Yeah.
And then, so I keep that in mind, and then this budget comes to about 3%, I think. As I went through it, I didn't look at all the departments, because some are small, but I looked at the big departments, and looked at the percentage of increase in each. Of course, the schools is the question of, does the $500,000 of free cash from last year count in the base, or doesn't it? And we're going to repeat that or not. That would affect the percentages. I'm not debating it right now, but I'm saying whatever the outcome is will change those percentages. But what we have in here at the moment is, it looks like it's either a 5% increase or a 2% increase, depending on whether or not you count that money. You show, this was 24, so I can't go by that. But what I'm showing is with the, let me see if I got this right. I've got numbers all over the place here. But at the moment, if we include the 500,000 from last year in the base would be 21,435,000 for the schools. And the number you have in here is only about a 2% increase. However, if we do not contemplate that 500,000, then obviously the increase is bigger, I don't know, 5% or something. I didn't compute that. So that's key to this. What I was trying to do is compare the growth in expenses to the growth in revenues, then look at each department to see how they fare. That's my method. So anyway, I guess what I'm concluding is that until we, which you've said, until we decide where we're going with the school budget, it's hard to do the rest, because that has an effect on everything, because it's the largest. And to a lesser extent, the same is true for the police department and the fire department. And there are, in the police department, you show what I think is a 4.5% increase. Now, we had a 6.4% increase last year because we had that arbitration, and we had to pay extra, if you recall. But this year, it's still 4.5, so I assume you're contemplating some increase there with the negotiations. The fire department, interestingly, if I'm doing this right, was only up 3%. But anyway, we need to talk about some of that later on to see just by department, and in the larger departments, what is the real number there that we're talking about. So these are really more comments than questions as I went through this. But my bottom line was, at the moment, the revenues in this budget are higher than what we're spending, so that's good news. But not by a lot. It's only like by half a point, but that's worth something. So what do you think? And there's other questions.
I just want to. Can you just clarify on the salary lines? In this budget, did you assume 2%? Because we don't have the unions negotiated yet. So what your assumption was? What?
2%.
2%. Okay. So might be a challenge, actually.
Okay, we're going to have an opportunity to discuss this again a couple of times, right? I see from the schedule.
Yes. Yeah.
So we got a way to go, and we need to send a budget to the Finance Committee, our recommendation by February, middle of February, thereabouts. Valentine's Day.
Dates, I don't have dates.
I think it's February
20th
10th.
or something like that, or 19th, yeah.
Or
Okay.
20.
So we will be having, the point is, we want to be discussing this at every meeting from here on out, obviously. And do you think it's appropriate now to talk about the upcoming meeting on January 3rd with the schools, the Finance Committee, and the Board of Selectmen, just to get a little
Sure.
information out on that? Well, Jim and I have been working hard to come up with a 5-year plan, and we're not quite there yet. But and it's one of these things it's called assumption sensitive. You change one number and everything else changes, particularly if it's a large department. But I want you to know that we did agree to do this. By the way, it's in Jim's goals and performance goals for the year. So we got him hooked. But this is a collective effort, in my view. And on January 3rd, we probably want to report in on that. So I don't think we have anything for handing out yet, but we do have kind of a rough draft of a 5-year plan. It's not very conclusive at the moment, but we're also preparing a 5-year capital plan. We pretty much have those numbers, I see.
I think so, yes.
It's just a matter of putting together a narrative to capture all of that. We kind of know the general trends, and that's fairly easy. But anyway, in that budget, the 5-year plan, 5-year budget plan, there, depending on revenues, you start to talk about where can we cut. You mentioned something about can we afford to send kids to vocational schools. I think a better way of saying that is, not that there's anything wrong with what you said, but can we afford to continue to pay for full tuition at vocational schools? Because I have a tough time believing we would ever not want to be a part of Bristol Aggie and Diamond. And the voters with Bristol Aggie, of course, with both Bristol Aggie and Diamond voted for debt exclusion. So we know the sentiment is clear there. But it is costing us $2 million a year in tuition. We're not talking about the capital expenses, which are substantial. So this is, when you start playing what if, or what if we did this, what if we did that, it's all painful. It's all painful. It's painful to write about it, it's painful to talk about it. But we do have to, we'll be doing that on January 3rd with the 3-part group. Evan, I assume you'll be there as well, I hope. And, but anyway, I'm just throwing out stuff for consideration, because these are the things we're going to be talking about up until when we get a budget that we all think we can live with and be happy with. But it's a tough one this year. Yeah, do you have any, you're here and then representing the schools, I didn't want to ignore you if you have anything to say.
I'm just here to listen, but,
Okay.
on the school side, I'm sure as you all know, we're dealing with, out-of-district placements is always an unpredictable cost. We're in the middle of union negotiations, so there's a lot of unexpecteds on our side. So
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
consideration.
You have a tough job, I know that. Okay, well, those are my comments. I'll finish it there unless there's more discussion. And Jim, do you anything more? Anybody
That's all I
else?
have.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, that's good. We're off to a good start in terms of getting this on its way. All right.
Just last comment, again, these are all very preliminary numbers, and they will change as we move forward.
Can we
Working
post
on it.
these on the website?
Yes, we get them up Wednesday. Call us out
When we have
tomorrow,
somebody
so
back.
I'll see if I can get them up tomorrow, but definitely by Wednesday.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is something we always look forward to, the town administrator report. You have it in your package, I believe.
Jim, it's in there.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't, it wasn't printed
No,
out.
Paula, we're all messed up.
Just on the internet.
Hey, he did the budget.
And the bottom
You
line?
did a good job, thank you.
So, Select Board, we already mentioned, the state has approved the name change from the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board, and I'm looking at my letterhead here, we have to make some changes on a lot of the things.
Yeah, letterhead, business cards and the like.
Sorry.
We were notified of a grant last week, received $146,875 from the State Community Compact Program. And that'll be to modernize the procedures for a number of the departments for online permitting and online record keeping. This is going to be a fairly intensive project, and it will take time away from the staff in order to get this up and running. It's going to be a commitment by a number of the departments in order to get this going. Mike Burris from the Planning Department worked on the grant, did a nice job with the grant. Keith Noble also helped them, so thank you to those guys. This is going to be a difficult one, and we will push to get it done as best we can. It'll take usually it takes a little bit of time to get the final contracts and the money in, so we probably won't even go out to bid for proposals, so we won't start until June or July, hopefully a month or two sooner, but it does take time. The sailboat, that has been washed up on Horse Neck Beach near the campground. Looking at it now, we were talking earlier, I hope they got it out before the storm, otherwise it could be up in the campground. Or it could be
Yeah.
out at,
Be up to
Cutting Hawk.
sea.
Yeah.
Could be on the point.
Who knows, but anyway, the state had agreed to remove it. They were going to cut it up and remove it in pieces and get rid of it. The appointments, the chair had mentioned the appointments of the police chief and fire chief. Right now, Fire Chief Dan Baldwin and the new police chief Chris Dunn. They are slated to start as of January 7th. They're looking at a possible swearing-in type ceremony on January 8th before the Board of Selectmen meeting, possibly 4 o'clock at the fire department, 5 o'clock at the police department. As soon as we get more specifics on that, we will get that information out to the board. Paving, the highway department's been busy. We actually had they got some good pricing for their asphalt contract for the street work, and they included the town hall parking lot. Originally, we were just gonna do patching. We had about $25,000 to correct the areas that were dangerous, but they were able to overlay the majority of the parking lot. The small section that we couldn't do, we just didn't have the funds to do that, but it looks good. They will probably strike that in the spring. So that's really cleaned up what was out there. We had a couple of dangerous, it's dark out there at night. We had a couple of complaints about people not tripping, but possibly tripping in the future, so that's great. They also are working at the cemetery. We've had a number of dirt and gravel roads around the areas that are actually being used right now, and it's really not conducive to the ceremonies that are being done down there, so they started paving those roads. That'll come out of the care money from the cemetery, and it looks nice. They've started, I think they have 1 or 2 more areas to do, but that's long overdue, and so thank you to the highway department for getting that done. They've also been down East Beach all day long. It's kind of a mess, so they've been busy. The old high school, I had mentioned before, we're still working with UMass Dartmouth on the potential use. They're looking for storage in the old high school. The school department is aware of what's going on, and we'll see where that goes. Andrew Nelson, we spoke with Andrew Nelson from Congressman Keating's office, Chris Leonard and myself last week. He believes it's looking fairly favorable at this point. It isn't definite yet, but looks like we may be getting some money for dredging in the harbor this year, which would be a big plus. That's been a problem over the last couple of years. Chris has worked hard on that, so hopefully we'll hear something definitive in the next couple of months. We have a tentative meeting scheduled for January 25th for the Drift Road, Kirby Brook bridge replacement. That's with Mass Highway, Mass DOT, and the engineer, Power Engineering. That'll be a remote meeting. We'll get an advertisement up on the website, and we will send notice to the neighbors down in that area, so they'll be at the meeting. And that is all I have.
I'm ahead of myself on Kirby Brook. I was going to mention that as an item for future discussion. The project is starting, as Jim was pointing out, hence the public hearing. And we have a first cut of plans, and we want to see what modifications can be made to make it stronger, safer, more attractive, or whatever. And we did indicate, if you remember, a couple years ago, that we would give the residents over there an opportunity to weigh in. I don't know how they feel about that. So we will be talking about that, but at some point we've got to put this on the agenda really to talk about the project and what it entails and what the timelines are and so forth. And we'd hoping to be saying that it's not going to cost the town any money because it's state money, so that's all good. But it's good. It's going to be something that's talked about a lot because action is starting on this, and this is good news. This is very good news. Okay. Anything else?
That's all I have.
Thank you, Jim.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Jim, on that dredging on the harbor, I had heard something too, like last year about some dredging in Fairhaven and stuff, and they had surplus material. This dredging project just happened at East Beach. I think it'd be worth talking to anybody to see about beach nourishment and so forth with that.
Yeah, again, a good idea to inquire and see what's involved. Yeah.
Because I mean, that's all the Army Corps, and those are the permits, so I think if they're going for the permits for dredging and doing the beach nourishment, I know they're trying to use some of it for the marsh reclamation or something like that, but
Nope, I can check on that.
I mean, I heard today that some septic systems were uncovered down at East Beach and all of that stuff too, so I don't know if I know we got a lot of studies out there.
Yeah, we do have a lot of studies, so yeah, I can check on that.
Last time it depended on the materials, because we tried to do that with the nourishment.
I do know it's a lengthy permitting process to do
Yeah.
beach nourishment, especially if it's not near the project site you're working on, but
Well,
it's still worth checking.
I think what we're dredging out of the mouth of the
Sure.
river probably came from that beach, so.
It could have.
Yeah.
Anything else, Vinnie? Okay, if we're done with that, we thank you. And the next item is 6, approved minutes.
All set? I approve them.
This would be December 4th.
Yep.
Second.
Motion made to approve the minutes of December 4th. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The motion carries unanimously, Bob. Thank you. The next one is the one we usually very excited to hear, the report on the bill warrant.
It was a really small one, nothing extra, no big payments or debt exclusions or anything like that. So it was about, I think it was roughly 2 million, which is pretty common. I reviewed it and signed it.
Thank you. The next item is the 8 Selectmen Liaison Committee reports and suggestions for future meeting discussion actions. I'll just pick on you, Ann, for no particular reason.
The only thing I had was the, why am I drawing a mention? Affordable housing. God, I'm long-term building affordable housing. Affordable housing met with CPC and presented, and we were moved forward to the next. Other than that, I sat in that meeting. I haven't had anything else.
Thank you, Ann. Shauna?
There's a school building committee meeting tomorrow evening. We haven't met in a very long time, so we'll see what's going on there. Most of it is executive session. There was a climate resiliency committee meeting last week. I was unable to attend, so I'm not sure what happened there. And that's about all for me.
Thank you. The only item I have, I was going to mention Kirby Brook, we did that earlier. There's a gentleman in town who has requested the opportunity to come before the select board to talk about the use of plastic bags by the stores and everything. You have to come up before.
Yes, Sean or myself.
Yeah. And I think it's an important subject, one way or the other. I'm not taking a side here, I don't have all the facts. But I don't personally have a problem with the gentleman coming in and talking to us and with a,
Student that's doing it for, is it the Boy Scouts or just a student? I think he's a young man.
He's a young adult, but I don't think he's a scout.
I thought it
He's
was
not
as
that
a
young.
project. All
I
right.
don't think he's that young.
So anyway-
He's just in the Board of Health, he's just a resident.
Yeah.
Okay.
okay. So I don't have any problem with this, unless anybody does. We'll just put it,
I looked into it before and then.
we'll put it on the agenda, and I don't know if we can do that for January 8th or not. Probably could. And we'll get in touch with him, and that'll be fine. We're always interested in new ideas.
I know people that actually make quotes out of those bags.
Uh-huh.
My daughter's at Matt's.
Matt, sorry.
All right, we'll do that in the near future. And that's all I have.
I gave you homework.
What was that?
CERTA, on the buses, did we verify that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it was clear in the announcement. It's
Yes. it's
every
anywhere.
place.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I was just verifying it.
Yes,
We
I-
stop and not just in inner city.
No, they're not leaving us out.
So, what did I have? We had Serpent, I sent the board the grant that's available, for a variety of things that might be useful. We have lights this week, I believe, did we have infrastructure in between? Anyways, we touched base on the big meeting we wanna have, regarding the, infrastructure committee. That would be our next big meeting, January 24th. Then there'll be a follow-up. Mike Rodrigues is out of town that week. We made it without running to buy Mike for a city. He has plans. So we'll have a meeting, a follow-up after that with Michael in more of a forum type setting. This is actually gonna be our meeting in a bigger setting because we expect businesses and whatnot to be there. We'll have like a forum after that to follow up. Because either way, we're gonna decide on what to address. And then we'll do a follow-up, like, again, with Michael explaining it.
The 24th, was that to be at the high school? Or?
High school, but that's our regular infrastructure meeting that we have to make a decision on the sections, what to go forward with, what to request from town meeting. Again, it's either one section, we called it phase before, but I'm trying to make it easy, phase 1, 3 sections, or actually Nanny suggested it. So briefly, the first section is up to Route 88 Bridge for 7.5, or the whole enchilada, including 3 sections, that would be roughly 32.5 million. And the point is, the second and the third section includes the affordable housing, that you could probably get more units in if we got rid of that gigantic hill that's there. Go down to the businesses that are already established, they can't do anything with the restaurant type thing in the plazas that you'd be able to do, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we'll be discussing at the big meeting.
Okay, look forward to that. Thank you. Anything else?
I believe that's it for now. Bicycle this week, just regarding that trails grant that I touched base with a while back.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Manny?
You know, just to add on that, yeah, it's kind of building momentum. And it should, we're gonna have that meeting at the high school. So, it should be a pretty big meeting. But we're also looking at, we're calling this the trunk line, and that's the way Senator Rodericks had presented it, is the trunk line from Fall River to Dartmouth is phase 1 Westport Sewer. So what we're trying to do now is we're to fund it in pieces, which was kind of confusing the public. We're calling it contracts. So the one that Steve just talked to, like the pump station will be next to Meatworks. That's contract 1. But what's transpired now is there's been some housing interest in that contract. Edgewater is in, the septic on the Watuppa has reached its useful life, needs to be replaced. They have room for expansion. They also own the yellow freight building that they're moving forward with some design plans, office and housing. And we're looking to incorporate that into a piece of, and a phase of this sewer. So another contract going in that direction, which will probably be, I think can be funded, if we get the trunk line going past it and the stub out into Borden's Way, can be funded by the developer. So, and that's what we're trying to hope, if we get this trunk line and get it out of Route 6, these businesses can develop it further.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I would have liked to have that meeting at Macumber, but it's just not conducive for the video and whatnot. We could actually go live from the high school. People could see better with the angle. If we had it at Macumber, we might have to talk on the stage. Everybody's at one level. It just works out a lot better at the high school. You know, again, it would have been quaint to have it right in the neighborhood that we want to work in, but
Yeah.
it just didn't work out.
Okay. Anything else, Manny? Okay, thank you. That completes that item. Next item would be comments and statements. This is where the public has an opportunity to speak. Any members of the public wish to speak? If not, we'll proceed. We wanted to give you the opportunity. The next item is just a reminder of the board, committee, commission's vacancy list. The list seems to be going down a little bit,
Yeah.
so that's good news, and we've filled some positions of late.
Jim, at the next meeting date,
For us?
you have the next meeting date handy just so we can announce it.
January.
You already did, January 8th.
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry.
But no,
Somebody had asked me and I wasn't sure what the holiday schedule was.
it's a good reminder. Okay, so that's the board's vacancy list, and that's looking good. 11 is topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of the meeting. Jim, I don't have any. Do you have any? None? And anyway, so there's no executive session tonight. And the next meeting is 3 weeks, January 8th. And in
It
2000.
just got a little confusing when you said the January 3rd. I want people to think that was a regular meeting with FinCom and whatnot.
Yeah, that's a separate meeting
Separate
with the FinCom and the schools. And
Yeah.
that is, we usually set that up, or Karen Rouse does as an open meeting. And
Yeah.
and all that.
I just
Okay.
wanted to think.
But that's not the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board. Okay, that being the case, we've done our work, so I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Happy holidays, everybody. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned, and Happy New Year.
You too. Merry Christmas first, but that's
Yeah,
fine.
Happy New Year. Yeah.
Happy everything.
Happy everything, yeah, exactly.